Hey, welcome to Isekai Manhwa Recap. In this video, we'll be covering chapter 1 to 8 of the Manhwa series I Picked a Hammer to Save the World. Before we begin, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be sure you don't miss the next episodes. Once upon a time, the world was doomed by demon armies and monsters killing humans however they pleased. They were trying to execute every human living in the world so they could rule over it. But to protect mankind from the grasp of demons and monsters, 10 of the strongest knights who used to guard the continent have been through hell and back. All of them wasted their full life force and mana to protect the innocent from the monsters of the underworld. The continent is now just a vast stretch of contaminated land where only death lingers. Millions of bodies can be seen lying on the surface of the earth, and all of these were caused by a single entity. Demon Commander Gluttony is behind all these inhuman killings of countless humans on the battlefield. This makes Tiny, the strongest knight of the continent, furious. It is exhausting how a single entity can cause the death of millions of innocent humans. When Tiny and the Demon Commander come face to face, Gluttony admits that Tiny's strength is overwhelming, but he will not be an easy demon to kill. It will be far from easy to take the life of Gluttony. The words uttered from the mouth of Gluttony make Tiny angrier than ever. He wields his hammer-like weapon above his head while jumping to hit the Demon Commander. The lightning wallop hit the hand of the Demon Commander, and at first, he thought nothing was going to happen to him. He mocked Tiny for his efforts and called them futile. Furious, Tiny went ahead, overpowering his hit like a meteor. It ended up finishing off the Demon Commander, slicing him in half. The victory finally came, but it came with the cost of countless lives, leaving Tiny on the verge of death. He was finally out of mana, and he wondered if everything was wrong from the very beginning. He questioned his own conscience, wondering if he had made any mistakes that took him to his extent. Mana training was considered to be the exclusive knowledge of distinguished knights and nobility. For that reason, Tiny had to overcome countless failures while advancing slower than everyone else around him. He went up to the top from the very bottom of the knights. He believed in himself that he could overcome complex challenges, but now he is questioning his own techniques and methods. He wonders if he was right in making choices and choosing paths. Maybe he could have saved everyone on the continent if only he had chosen the right path from the start. Tiny has only defeated one of the 7 commanders, and he was truly something else. If the 7th out of all the commanders wields that much power, then just how powerful are the other commanders and the Demon King? Honey wonders. All of a sudden, Tiny sees the sword of Emperor Asgard von Valent slowly dying just 2 or 3 feet away from him. But before he dies, he wants to ask Tiny why he didn't run away from the battle. He knows that Tiny was a child from the slums and it must have been pretty hard for him to come this far. Tiny says that a man should be confident and he would never run for the love of God. The Sword Emperor laughs after listening to his answers and praises Tiny's talent. Since he is one of the 10 strongest knights of the continent, Tiny feels like he is dying all of a sudden. And before it happens, the Sword Emperor reveals the name of his daughter, Lila, and tells him to come find him. Tiny wakes up in a familiar room from his childhood beside his sister's dead body. She died protecting his younger brother after a ring went missing because of him. The thugs barged into the room and kicked the chair, which dropped his sister's dead body on the ground. They wanted to sell her body to some sick dudes or harvest the organs to make money off of her dead body. Tiny gets furious and suddenly some kind of mana flows through his hands. He protects his dead sister's body from the thugs and realizes that he is really in the past to change the future. He cries while shouting, only if the Sword Emperor had sent him back just a little bit further, he would have been able to save his sister. He considers this chance to let his sister rest in peace. He remembers that he has to reach the Sword Emperor after taking his revenge on the man named Wolf who killed his sister. In his past life, Tiny barely killed him by snapping his spine, but he wants to take proper revenge this time. He and his sister weren't connected by blood, and all they had in common were black eyes and hair. His sister Erina was the only person that cared for him and didn't avoid him like the rest. She said Tiny reminded her of her own lost brother. She was the one who gave him the name and treated him with care and love. This time, he gives a proper burial to his sister. Emma, who was a friend of Erina, feels like something inside Tiny has changed after the death of her friend. His wounds didn't take much time to heal after getting bruised by the thugs before and carried his dead sister's corpse on his back. He reminds himself that he shouldn't blame himself or be discouraged, and Erina always told him to keep his head high. 1 month later, Tiny finally reaches the location where Wolf and his thugs are residing. He smashes through the thugs one by one, using his body of mana fused with his physical body, which makes him even more powerful. However, this transformation required him to eat 10 times more than a normal person. The thugs underestimated Tiny's small body and lack of weapons, making it easier for him to confront them alone. After defeating most of the thugs, only the Randers brothers are left. Tiny challenges them to come down and fight him. They realize that Tiny is a mana user, but Tiny sees through their movements and dodges their attacks, leaving a strong punch that destroys both brothers. Tiny then moves on to take revenge on the ruler of the invaders. He remembers being surprised in his previous life to find out that Wolf, aside from being a pimp, belonged to the Beastman tribe, which was considered the best among the demi-human races. Among them, the pure silver werewolf was special, and Wolf was particularly difficult to kill in Tiny's past life. Wolf becomes furious after seeing a mere kid smashing through his thugs, and he wants to rip Tiny's mouth off. Tiny mocks Wolf after seeing that he doesn't have silver fur and calls him a puppy. Heidi realizes that something has changed and this isn't the Wolf he fought in his previous life, which only makes him more furious. Tiny beats him up until Wolf comes to his senses and becomes human again. When Wolf drops to the ground, something falls out of his mouth that looks like a stone. He starts begging for his life and his sister's life, so Tiny doesn't kill him. Tiny asks Wolf what a beastman like him is doing in a place like this and notices the stone on the floor. After touching the stone, he realizes that it's actually a demonic QL, and suddenly a demonic wolf-like creature arises from the stone. In his previous life, Tiny was introduced to spiritual creatures by one of his female companions named Estina from the night ranks. He didn't know that there were spiritual creatures living outside of El Venom and had heard that animal spirits were rare. She also told him that the quintessence of a spirit is a spirit stone. The werewolf had a spirit stone with him, which was precious, but it was in a weird state since it was emanating a demonic aura that is usually present in spirit stones of demons. Tiny released the demonic chains that kept the creature chained, which released the memories of the silver wolf creature. In the memories, Tiny saw that the invaders with demonic aura were creating beastmen by making people absorb the spirit stone. That's how the leader of the invaders became the wolf guy. Since Tiny arrived sooner in this life, he couldn't absorb it completely. However, he was able to control the spirit, even though he had no knowledge of spirit taming. In his previous life, Estina told him that if someone has a pure soul and enough mana, the person could control a spirit. Young children can do that as well since they have a pure soul. It is revealed that Tiny's mana recovered the cracks on the spirit stone, and that's how he is now able to connect with it. Most spirits grow stronger in tandem with the increase in the tamer's strength, and this was the reason why Estina was one of the best among the 10 knights. Tiny named the silver wolf Lunar Wolf, and it woke up the invader leader from the out-of-mind state. The leader told them that the demon worshippers are from an organization and revealed that he was only a test subject. However, he couldn't reveal any crucial information about them since the organization had planted an enchantment on his mouth. He died miserably. The same kind of incident happened in Tiny's previous life, but at that time, he had no idea of him being a beastman. Tiny broke the wall in the treasure chest behind it, which exposed all the golden treasures. He knew he had to make his future ally, the Sword Emperor, trust him. So, he had to take the Valentina family's ring with him. In his previous life, Chloe Van Valentina, the youngest daughter of the Sword Emperor, was kind enough to give him a ring so he could later look for her with that ring and get help. Everyone living in the Asian Empire knew her, and she was named the Angel of Valentina for her kindness. She met Tiny while it was time for her to lay flowers in each temple to make her name known. Lamb, the File's outer castle commander of guards, came looking for Tiny. Since he made a ruckus, he was looking for a way to up his bribe. With this excuse from the invader leader, the knight became furious after Tiny made fun of him, which made him attack Tiny. But since Tiny is low in mana power because of his age, he didn't want to make the estate lord his enemy just yet. In the troops, they had too many for him to cover. After taking a look at the spirit wolf, Lamb was frustrated, but it all went down peacefully when Tiny introduced bribe in the conversation. Tiny then, as a new owner, paid the knight extra to greet the estate lord while asking for a schedule to the knight. But before leaving the scene, the knight reminded Tiny to pay him in time if he doesn't want to see the wrath of the estate lord. But on the inside, Tiny was planning something greater that was way beyond the knight's knowledge. The gang of the previous leader who ratted out the knight about Tiny was forced to bring anyone who worked in the invader in 1 hour. Everyone in the invader was scared after seeing the corpse of Wool since he was backed by the estate lord himself. But Tiny knew something about the estate lord of Files that could blow out of proportion, which he could use as a leverage. The outer castle commander, Lamb, was under probation for the whole incident that happened in Invader. All single shops and stores were closed after the rise of Tiny as the new Invader boss, and the Lord wasn't making any money. The Lord of Files called in Tiny for a private interview. With the knowledge Tiny gained from his past life and experience, he knew that the account book is the quickest way to finish off the estate lord and his lunacy. Everyone living in the Invader was given the permission to take revenge on Wolf and take away his money and treasure to move in Diane. Emma told Tiny to come find her afterward in Diane if it's too hard for him someday, and he thanked her for the gratitude by Tiny's actions. The red light district of Files Invader was permanently closed after Tiny's arrival and his assertive attitude inside the palace of the estate lord. This angered Kron, the Grand Master of Files Night Order, who wanted to eliminate Tiny with the estate lord's permission. Upon entering the chamber of the estate lord, Tiny was shocked by his appearance. Despite being a noble, Baron, the estate lord, was fat and heavily addicted to drugs. Tiny, dedicated to supplying the account book to the Duke of Valentino, flattered Baron by expressing his desire to be one of his servants. However, he wasn't pleased as he had lost money for Tiny, and he was also concerned about Tiny's young age. Tiny managed to keep the situation in his favor by rounding up facts, saying that he saved the estate lord from the Duke of Valentino's crackdown on drugs and prostitution. The estate lord praised Tiny for his methods, despite them being rough, as they helped him in the long run. He then questioned Tiny about the spirit of a wolf that he now controls, which was stolen from Wolf Spirit Stone. While furious with him, it was revealed by the power of the lunar wolf spirit that there was a circle around the estate lord made of demonic energy, and he was a dark magician who purchased corpses from Invader from the dark. Baron clarified Tiny's mana and skills with the help of Khan, which would soon reach level 2. When he asked Tiny where he learned his techniques, he avoided the question by saying they were inherited from his parents. As nobody would believe him now if he said he developed them, Tiny thought he had won the conversation. However, the Emperor Lord's guest was coming to verify, which made Tiny slightly scared. The estate lord had also expressed concern about Tiny's age, and he warned him that there would be consequences if he didn't pay him on time. It looked more like he was in the organization that Wolf mentioned. Everything would go according to Tiny's plan if the guest arrived after 15 days, but it turned out bad for him since he would arrive in a week, which made him more irritated and frustrated at the same time. Duke's men usually take a total of 15 days to commence the arrest or punishment. The sudden announcement left Tiny with only 2 options. The first one is fleeing from the palace, which will make him a wanted man and create problems when he tries meeting the Sword Emperor. The second option is making a ruckus in Files, which will have everyone's focus in this place, and there will be a great chance of the visit being cancelled or postponed. Meanwhile, he has to train enough to gain enough strength to defeat the Grand Master and the Lord. To train, Tiny has to burn more food than everyone else, so he eats more than anyone he knows. The more he eats, the stronger he becomes, and that habit scared everyone inside the palace. A knight named Grant came and annoyed Tiny while he was eating, which ended up causing a duel between him and Tiny. The Grand Master was supporting the knight and encouraging him to fight Tiny, even though one of the other knights wanted him to not cause any trouble. In the duel, Grant and Tiny both refused to use any lethal weapons since they didn't feel the urgency. By underestimating the strength of Tiny, Knight Grant made a grave mistake. Tiny broke both of his legs in the fight, which caused him great pain, but he was still resilient. The willpower of Grant was not useful in the particular fight since Tiny was one of the greatest knights in the whole continent, and his techniques were way out of Grant's grasp. Honey jumped on his back and grabbed his head, which ended up with Grant being unconscious. Everyone around the fighting pit was astonished since the knight was defeated by a mere child even without the help of Lunar Wolf. The whole event made Tiny more confident than before, but something weird happened, which turned Tiny upside down.